Well, good morning. Welcome back to the Broadcast Retirement Network. I'm Jeff Snyder. This is BRN Sunday for Sunday, July 11th, 2021. So glad you could join us. We've got another great show this week. We'll be analyzing all the news in retirement markets, technology, personal finance, so much more with folks from academia, financial services, and of course, the media. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode of BRN Sunday. Let's kick things off on the show with a look at what's happening legislatively, regulatorily, and litigation-wise. And joining us on the line, they're known as the Legal Eagles, but also known as David Levine, Kevin Walsh. Both are principals with the Groom Law Group, an employee benefits law firm based in good old Washington, D.C. Gentlemen, great to talk to you this morning. Thanks for joining us.
It's great to be on, and as we get into the hot part of summer, it's good to talk about a topic that's heating up or continuing to heat up, which is retirement plan litigation.
Excellent, David. You want to kick us off with some analysis?
Sure. Every week, or sadly every day, it seems like there's a new lawsuit. Like if you look at the numbers that we track at our firm, there was basically one lawsuit almost every 3 days or every 3.5 days last year filed over just 401k fees alone. Mm-hmm. So we could bore the listeners by giving you a staged reading of a complaint, which is great bedtime reading, but would also probably drive people away from the Broadcast Retirement Network, Jeff. So based on that, I thought what we would start off today when I'm talking is a little bit about a case. I'm not going to go into the names and the plaintiff's lawyers because that's probably not the core focus. But there was a new case filed this week where the complaint is interesting. Some of them are very bespoke, custom complaints. Some of them are, as defense lawyers, we say cookie cutter. But this complaint is interesting because it walks through every service or almost every service in the plan, from consulting to the investment fees, to the record keeping, to all the other add-on services that add value to the plan, and says, well, this is what it was this year, and then it went up to this, and what did they do additional in this and that? You can get stuck in the weeds on that, but I find that interesting because this complaint really tried to walk through and say, it's all about the cost. And as of other decisions, there have been some good decisions coming out on motions to dismiss recently, which sometimes you win, sometimes you don't. But one of the things you've really seen recently in this process is the plaintiffs will regularly say that it was just too expensive, cost bad. Kevin and I have talked about this with you many times, but I think a real takeaway looking at complaints like this is that, yes, fees are one element that you look at in a process. But if you look at even Department of Labor guidance and preambles, like some of the late Trump guidance, it is clear as day that fees are not the only factor. ERISA does not say it's all about the cost. Mm-hmm. That's just not what it is. But a lot of the complaints do. But we have to accept that cost is going to continue to be a part of complaints. And what you look at, the DOL looks at it too. Everybody does. So how do you deal with it? Looking at complaints like this, where they actually go into the weeds and details, shows why documentation of process is so key. Mm-hmm. And the process applies consistently across the board. It's understanding whether it's record keeping, it's consulting, or other services, why you are paying what for and how much for what service. It does not need to be the cheapest. Cost is but one consideration. But clearly, given the cost gets the focus, it is another good reminder. And the simple takeaway is, when you do your documentation, for instance, when you have minutes, there's no one right way to do them. But it's important that if you make a decision and you're saying, well, I picked on these factors, it can be very helpful in your minutes to say, I picked this, even though the other cost may have been lower for A, B, and C, D reasons. Mm-hmm. This is an individual choice. But that's kind of the takeaway from current litigation, because the more you do that, this is for later in the case, it can help you a lot, because even though cost is not the be all end all, it's always going to be the center of the case. And that's just sort of almost like a friendly reminder segment, because we've had this discussion before, but the fact that the plaintiffs are digging so deeply is a big deal. But I know Kevin has something to talk about. I've gone from the district courts, like the entry level courts. Kevin, you have anything to talk about at the Supreme Court level?
I was going to take it to the Supreme Court level. And, here's the exciting and big news of the week, which is that the Supreme Court has decided that it will hear an ERISA case next term. So we've talked a fair amount about this case, Hughes versus Northwestern University. At one point, it was called Devine versus Northwestern University. And, at the Supreme Court level, they get to pick what issue they want to hear. And it's important when they hear cases because they provide some uniformity around the country in terms of how ERISA or how other laws get interpreted. And one trend we've seen recently has been a pivot by plaintiff lawyers from bringing, just pure prohibited transaction claims to bringing claims that are based more on, arguing that it was imprudent to include an investment option. And the key here is that the Supreme Court has decided they're going to address the question of whether allegations that a defined contribution retirement plan paid excessive fees, whether it's enough simply to say that an investment is more expensive than other available alternatives. So next term we can expect to get a decision that maybe they'll answer the question straightforwardly and say it's sufficient just to say that there were cheaper investments available. Maybe we'll get a more nuanced decision, but it shows that the Supreme Court is finally getting involved in helping sort out the as David said, there's been kind of a case a week. They're getting involved in sorting out, separating the meritorious sheep from the goat claims. And that's kind of the big takeaway this week.
Well, gentlemen, just kind of touching on, and I'm going to wear my consultant hat, which I had put aside for the last few years, just to pick up on something David said. It's all about the process. And I think what people don't recognize, this is my point of view, not anyone else's on this programs, is that these retirement plans, which may have 500 people, 1,000 people, 10,000 people, 50,000 people, they're ecosystems. And because they're filled of they're an ecosystem, they have individuals. And individuals have all different types of needs. And so if it's a manufacturing ecosystem, if it's a healthcare ecosystem, if it's a public sector ecosystem, the construction of the services really is determined based on that ecosystem. So it's really hard to compare apples to apples and saying, well, why are you doing it this way over here and this way over there? And that's where, going back to what David and Kevin both said, you both said, I should say, because I'm addressing the audience, but it really is about how you made your selection, what was important, what were the important factors in making that decision, what did you use, and writing it all down, because that's what you have left after that decision was made. Any comments on that, gents?
No,
I think you're keying on a key issue, which is that process matters. I think you were summarizing examples of process that could be used, and the key is that process counts in ERISA.
Yeah. Well, gentlemen, we're going to leave it there. It's great. I'm sorry that things are heating up in that regard, but look, you can get out to the pool, relax, go golfing, fishing, whatever it is you're going to do. Have a great weekend, and look forward to chatting with you again next week.
Thanks so much, Jeff.
Bye, guys. Welcome back. Now we're going to shift gears, talk personal finance. Joining us on the line, she is personal finance reporter for The Motley Fool. We're going to welcome back to the program Mari Backman. Mari, great to have you back. Hope you had a great time off, great vacation, and great Independence Day.
Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, no, I did. It was it's been nice to have things looking a little bit more normal.
Absolutely. Well, it's since you've been gone, doing your going on vacation and Independence Day, a lot obviously going on with employment, wages, etc. I know you wanted to talk a lot about unemployment. What can you tell us?
Yeah, well, so the unemployment situation is interesting, right? Because, we keep hearing that the jobless rate is a lot lower than it was back in the day, and, things are getting better. But we're still seeing a lot of flip-flopping in actual jobless activity. So one interesting thing that happened was, the June jobs report came out a short while ago, and everyone was expecting to see a lower national unemployment rate in June compared to May, since things are supposedly getting better, except the jobless rate actually ticked upwards slightly. Now, the good news was that, over 800,000 jobs were added to the economy in June, but in spite of that, the jobless rate still ticked upward. Mm-hmm. And then, Jeff, another thing that I do here is I track the weekly jobless claims that get filed. So this is for new unemployment claims, people who are for the first time, filing a claim for unemployment. Mm-hmm. And those numbers also keep flip-flopping. We'll have a few weeks where they're dropping. 1 week is a little bit lower numbers than the previous week, and that's a good thing. But then we're kind of seeing some upticks, and just this morning we saw a slight uptick for the week, ended July 3rd. We saw a slight uptick compared to the week prior to that. So, I think it's important to just shed some light on the jobless situation, basically to just make it very clear that while the economy is still in much better shape than it was, back in like April, May of 2020, we're not out of the woods quite yet. And, I never want to sound alarmist and tell people, live in fear, live on edge of, you might lose your job. I never want to tell people that. Mm-hmm. But I do think it's important that the public just be aware of the fact that, jobs are still being shed. Hundreds of thousands of jobs are still being shed on a weekly basis. And I just think that's something that, on my end, what that would prompt me to do is really just be a little cautious. It wouldn't, especially if I have no reason to believe that my industry is being impacted or my job's being impacted. I don't think I would lie awake at night thinking, oh my gosh, what if I lose my job every night? But what I probably would do, Jeff, and one thing that I do is, it prompts me to really just be a little bit more mindful, of what my finances look like and what my spending looks like, especially at a time when a lot of people are going, a little bit extra on the spending because, hey, things are better with the pandemic and it's summertime and the weather's great, so let's get out there, let's get back to restaurants, let's get back to vacations. And again, this isn't to say that people shouldn't do those things. Mm-hmm. But, I think the underlying theme of a lot of our conversations, Jeff, is mindfulness. And, it's just something I like to preach a lot. And I just think that, when you really dig into these jobless numbers, they're a little bit sobering. And I think it's just something that we really just want to keep in the back of our minds.
It's interesting. We had a conversation last week, Maury, with an economist at the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis, and we talked about teen employment. And it seems like there's a lot of opportunity out there for teens. And as you know, both of us know, working in your teens, great way to get your foot in the door, get experience, and get kind of a leg up on where you're going to be in your career, whether it's, you're going to college, you're going to a vocational or a tech school. It really is a good opportunity. That seems like there is good short-term, I guess my point is there's good short-term work available, but to your earlier point, hey, if it's seasonal, maybe they're shedding jobs. Like if you just are working over the summer, that's a summer job that gets shed come fall because you don't need the pools, you don't need people minding the golf greens or whatever, whatever the jobs are, right?
Right.
Right. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, well, I mean, and that's also why it's a little bit hard to compile this data on weekly claims, because a lot of times you'll see this information sort of being presented on an adjusted basis, and often you'll see, one number come in as the number of claims reported, and then a week later they're reporting the next week's number, but they're also revising the previous week's number, saying, okay, wait, we were wrong, the number's really a little bit higher, a little bit lower. And there are going to be these fluctuations. But, it's really funny, too, because, you're hearing so many conflicting things, right? The American Rescue Plan, which was signed into law in March, that was the relief bill that put stimulus checks in people's pockets. Mm-hmm. That bill allowed for boosted unemployment benefits through the beginning of September. Logic being, that at the time the economy was in worse shape than it's in today. And over the past month or so, more than half of states have actually pulled the plug on that boost ahead of its September expiration date. And the reason is they're citing all of these labor shortages. They're saying, okay, well, we have, business owners all over the state that, they can't find workers, they can't hire. So, you're hearing about labor shortages, but we're also hearing reports, as was the case today, where there were 373,000 new weekly jobless claims that just came in. And it's hard to wrap your head around that, because it's like, so wait a minute, so is there an unemployment crisis, or is there a labor shortage? And, I think it's okay to say that there may be both simultaneously. There are a lot of people who are still losing jobs. There are a lot of industries that are struggling to hire. The reason they're struggling to hire, I don't think, is solely because of boosted unemployment. I think there are other issues that may be overlooked, like child care constraints and even just, health concerns. A lot of people aren't comfortable going to work, let's say, at a restaurant or in a store now that masks aren't a requirement. Even if those people are vaccinated, that might be outside of their comfort zone. And I don't think anyone should really be judging that. But that's why you might have a situation where, for example, in so-and-so city, 30% of restaurants are understaffed and can't hire. Well, okay, because people don't want to work in that environment, especially at not a very generous wage. But again, on the flip side of that, you have companies that are struggling to hire, but you also have people who are being let go. So, there's no real specific takeaway here, Jeff. Sometimes we'll have these discussions and I'll say, okay, so the takeaway here, folks, is check your credit report, or the takeaway is, put extra money into your retirement account. That's not really one of these conversations, but the point of this conversation, of this discussion, is really to just, make it clear that while the economy is in better shape than it was a year ago, it's not recovered. People are still losing jobs. And, it's just, I think it's important to just, keep that in mind and let that information in the background, if you will, sort of just, guide your decisions. It may mean that you spend a little bit more conservatively on a vacation this summer. It doesn't mean you shouldn't go, if that makes sense.
I think it does. And what I took away, I think you painted a nice picture, or a picture. I thought it was nice how you painted the picture. Let's put it that way.
It's a picture.
Yeah,
I don't have nice.
No, it was nice. It was nice, comma, how you painted the picture. Let's do it that way. But what I really took away was mindfulness. And you're, as an individual, anyone listening to this or anyone reading an article at The Motley Fool, your personal situation. You know where you stand financially. Even if you may not want to admit it to yourself, but having the mindfulness to monitor your spending and to take some of the lessons we learned through the pandemic into the post, whatever this period is called, the post pre-pandemic, the post-pandemic, whatever that period is, very important. And I think it's that lesson of being mindful and being aware of your spending and how important it is to have something for the future. If you can put money away, very important. And so I think that's kind of the takeaway listening to you. Well, Mari, it's always a pleasure chatting with you. And look, we don't have to have a, it doesn't have to be one of those types of, segments where, it's just like, do this, do this, do this. I don't think we have to have a tick-off list. I think just reminding people, that's what finance is. That's what personal finance is. It's reminders, because we don't all go through the same situations at the same time all the time. So I think having you on every 2 weeks to remind us of what we should be or could be thinking about, really important. And we're going to have to leave it there. Mari Backman, always a pleasure chatting with you. Great to have you back, and look forward to having you back on the program in a few weeks.
Sounds good, Jeff.
Bye-bye. Welcome back. Now we're going to take a look at tech and consumer goods. And joining us on the line, he is lead advisor, executive producer for 7 Investing. We're talking to Daniel Klein. Dan, great to talk to you as always. Thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Good morning, Jeff. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's always great to talk to you. And we always talk about a dearth of issues, a plethora, a myriad of issues, whether it's technology, pure technology, or we even get into the final frontier. Let's, what do you want to tackle first? Do you want to tackle security, or do you want to tackle space?
So let's go serious first and talk security. So there were 2 big breaches over the last few weeks. There was a small business breach that I believe we've talked about. And then this week, Microsoft put out an emergency off-cycle patch to Windows designed to protect people's computers. And the reason I bring this up, and we've talked about this before, is just I think security, along with space, frankly, are going to be the big stories of the next decade. That right now we have sort of an unprecedented level people trying to breach our data, both on a corporate level and on an individual level. And I'm not sure it's something too many people take seriously, Jeff. I mean, how many people do you know that like their pet's name is their password, or their password is password123? Not to give away Jeff's.
Yeah, thanks. You just outed me, buddy.
Yeah, Jeff's banking pin is of course 1234.
Yeah,
So
that's true. That's absolutely true.
If Microsoft, which normally releases scheduled updates, so if you automatically update, it happens on a regular schedule. Them doing something off cycle suggests there was real danger. And as an individual, you need to take steps to make sure all your accounts are protected. We've talked about this. Be very skeptical when opening unsolicited email. If you get a letter from Amazon that says, something's wrong with your order and please give them your info, make sure you go to Amazon.com to check and see whether that's true. Don't do it through the email. We're really at a time where our digital world is under siege, and I'm not sure the average person notices that until they figure out that their credit card has been used by somebody else, or that their bank account has purchases they didn't make.
Yeah, I think this it's like your health, right? Your financial health, your overall health. There's responsibility there, and then I feel like your data health, your personal data. You've got to be vigilant here, and we're going to be talking about this on the network. I think in perpetuity, Dan. This is only going to exacerbate. I mean, you read about the Microsoft hack. You hear about these SolarWinds hacks, that the Colonial Pipeline, right? These ransomware attacks. They're only going to become more numerous, not less. So the question is, how do you as a customer, consumer, make sure that you are keeping your information? First of all, are you getting the information you need in a timely manner from the entity that has been breached? Because everyone's susceptible. And two, what are you doing about it?
Yeah, I mean, as a business, you should be using something like Okta, to have two-factor authentication for all of your logins. And look, my previous employer used that. We use something a little different where I am now, but my previous employer used that, and it was frustrating. You'd get on a plane, and you wouldn't be able to log into your email, even though there was Wi-Fi, because the two-factor authentication sent something to your phone, which you couldn't get while on a plane. So there were definitely issues with it. But overall, the security was intense. We had to change our passwords every 90 days, and it couldn't be similar to our previous password. I think as an individual, you have to maintain that kind of discipline. Now, look, if there's nothing sensitive in your account, well, maybe you don't have to be as careful. But things get sent to our email. Maybe not passwords, but account numbers, and somebody's ability to send email as you could cause you all sorts of problems. So it's something you really need to, all your financial accounts, you should be checking at least monthly and making sure there's no strange charges, there's nothing you don't understand. And look, this has happened to me where I've had to call my credit card company and be like, I don't understand what this charge is, and then realized, oh, wait, it was a charge I made. It's just like the name is different than the company I thought I was making the charge with. That can happen. It can be frustrating, but you have to take the lead on this. And as an individual, you probably want to opt into all the security measures. A lot of sites will say, do you want two-factor authentication? You think, oh, that's a pain. Every time I log in, I have to get a text message and verify that it's me. The reality is you want to do that because silly things like you don't want someone, posting things that you wouldn't post to your Twitter or your Facebook account or your TikTok or your Instagram or whatever it might be. So you really need to be serious about this.
I agree, Dan. And again, I think it's like that third, fourth, or fifth legs of the stool that you need to be thinking about as a consumer. And we need to do a great job of educating not only people our age, younger people, and mature people, because we've all gone more to technology during the pandemic. And by the way, Dan, I don't mind the two-factor authentication. I just know that I'm going to have my phone with me if I'm changing my password. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Yeah, look, passwords are difficult. I have a number of passwords on my laptop that I use the generated code. And in theory, there should be a password chain that lets that pop up on my iPhone, but it doesn't always work. So sometimes you're like, wait a minute, I want to log into this on my phone, and my password is some letter soup that I have no concept of, so I have to go in and reset my password. That is a pain, but the reality is it's better to do that. And there are password manager programs that you can use, so you only have to remember one password. And look, this is not a case of I don't always practice what I preach. I'm not always great about this, but in any of my sensitive accounts, I try to be really careful and have harder to know passwords. And, your password, you mentioned older people, shouldn't be the name of your grandchildren, because the name of your grandchildren are public. And people guess that. Even when it's real world, real words, those can be deciphered pretty easily by programs. So this is an area where you need to assume that there are villains out there and that there are people trying to get it. And if someone has your info, look, if someone has your bank account info, they're not necessarily going to take all your money. They might take $2 a week for 3 years and you don't notice. And if they do that from enough accounts, when I used to run a very large toy store, during Christmas season, someone got access to our account and they were taking $375 a week. Well, we didn't notice for 2 months, because that time of year you do $100,000 a day. So, how do you notice you're losing that? And as a business, you actually only had 5 days to report it. So we had to have a pretty big fight with our bank over that money. As an individual, I think you get 30 days. That may not be true in every state, but it was true in Connecticut. You should be vigilant and check your account. And look, if you're not sure what something is, ask the question. It never hurts to ask.
Yeah, I agree with you. Be vigilant. There are no dumb questions. There are no dumb questions. Dan, let's have a little fun now. Let's talk about that final frontier, at least the final frontier today. I don't know, maybe time would be the final frontier. But let's talk about the final frontier, which is space. And it seems like Jeff Bezos and Richard Branson, two gazillionaires, one has more money than the other, I think, they're in a race to get to space first.
So, Jeff, this is the dumbest thing I've ever seen. So, first of all, Blue Origin, the Bezos company, their goal is actually like long-term space travel.
Yeah.
It's a much farther-reaching company than what Branson is doing. Branson's company, Virgin Galactic, their original product is going to be, let's call it space tourism. It's basically 18-minute flights. We're sort of in like a suborbit version of space. You're weightless for a couple of minutes. To me, this isn't space travel, but people are lining up to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to do this. Their end product is actually going to be faster Earth-based travel. So you might be able to go from New York to Australia in 90 minutes. And that, in theory, that might not be worth 200 grand, but for a business traveler, maybe that's worth 10 grand. So that's going to be their ultimate product. But right now they're racing to say they're the first one in space. And while there have been a lot of tests of both rockets, and I understand the hype factor of, wow, this is safe, we put our billionaire owner on it. This also sounds like the bad ending to a biopic where it's like, Jeff Bezos, Richard Branson, they did all these amazing things, but then they blew up on the way to space. I think this is kind of irresponsible. Branson is not as beholden to shareholders. There are shareholders for Virgin Galactic, but many of his companies are private. Bezos has just moved up to being the executive chairman of Amazon. And I don't think either one of them should be doing it. I understand the boyhood dream of going to space, but I think you should be on the 25th flight if you're either of these people. You should not be on the first flight. And I understand there were test flights. This is supposedly safe, but airlines are safe and things go wrong. This is very, very early days, and I'm not sure we want to risk two of the more important people in the world because they're in some race to prove their spaceship is better.
Yeah, I mean, this is the old adage is that my is better than yours, right? I mean, this is like the sandbox conversation that we all had as kids. My dad's better than yours, my mom's better than yours, all that kind of stuff. Dan, I guess to me, I'm never going to be in space, as far as I know. I mean, someone would probably argue that I am already in outer space.
So, Jeff, I don't know that that's true, because I actually think this is going to be an industry that
you think
you're going to have this next 2 years of incredible demand where people are paying these, outrageous, $225,000 or the one seat left on the Bezos flight auctioned off for $26 million or something like that. But I actually think capacity is going to increase. There's going to be a number of players. There's already talk of one sort of space balloon that's going to go out of Florida. I actually think this is something that's going to be on the level of a very expensive luxury cruise rather than a condo. So I don't think it's crazy that 15 years from now, you might be able to go to space for $3 grand. And when I say space, I mean this 18-minute, you're kind of weightless. And frankly, I don't want to do that. I'm looking forward to 25 years from now when I could go on the space cruise that stops at Disney World on the moon or whatever. I'm not so sure I need to rocket up to space, be weightless for 2 minutes. You might as well just go to the $40 indoor skydiving place. So I think a lot of this is a scam, but not a scam, but because they are telling you what it is. But a lot of this is sort of gussying up an amusement park ride. I'm not so sure that the Virgin Galactic $250,000 ride to space is $250,000 better than Mission Space at Epcot. So I will instead pay I have an annual pass, but if I was just getting in regularly, I'll pay the $167 or whatever it is, go ride Mission Space 5 or 6 times, maybe get to stop and do Soarin' and visit some of the countries. Seems to me a better value, but I do like where we're going, and I think very quickly space tourism is going to become a thing, and this sort of changed faster travel. We're at the real beginning of a new age, and I think we were promised this since we were kids, Jeff, and I think it's now finally coming, and I'd like to hope we're both young enough that we'll get to take advantage of it.
Well, I'm going to live in the triple digits, well in the triple digits. I think 200-300 years is what I'm shooting for. I've been trying to get myself healthy, work out, et cetera, to extend that and to be able to see this. I guess, Dan, from my perspective, I'm more focused on my personal earthly issues right now, saving, working with my wife, et cetera. But it is exciting. If I could have my druthers, I'd like to go see the rings of Saturn, or if we're talking, what is some of the great sites, Enceladus or Titan. I think that would be kind of neat. I'm not so sure I want to go around the moon, because I've seen great pictures from the Apollo landings and also some of these rovers and things that have gone around the moon. So I'm not so, but that's just Jeff Snyder. That may not be you, and may not be the majority of people.
I think we're seeing the benefit of private innovation here. That there was always government investment in space, and the reasons for that were defense, and we need to get there before the Russians, and now we need to be there more than the Chinese. And when you have private companies doing it, they're either doing it for altruistic reasons. If you've ever read science fiction, you understand that eventually mankind has to expand beyond the Earth. Or they're doing it for commercial reasons. If you're Branson, there is the boyhood space dream, but there's also wait a minute, I could own this business category, and I can be the one, getting paid millions of dollars to launch satellites into space, or Elon Musk with SpaceX. Hey, I can provide an alternate internet, or in some parts of the world, the only internet. We're getting some really amazing innovations because really rich people are behind this. And I think that's going to lead to pretty impressive things. Look, I haven't used Starlink. That's the SpaceX internet, but I have a tech friend who makes a living on YouTube, and he's used it in a multiple of places, and he says it's really good. Well, as someone who travels a lot, are we to the point where I'm going to lug a satellite dish on my back? No. But maybe 10 years from now, is there a pocket satellite dish I'm setting up on the the balcony of my cruise ship room, and then I have good internet instead of terrible internet? Like those things might be coming. And I think that's really because we flipped the switch on how we innovate. And, especially with space, we've taken it away from being a government program, and we've made it a private thing. And that's not going to work for everything, because most things aren't as exciting as space. But in this case, we've got sort of all of our best and brightest pursuing these really interesting things that will eventually benefit us all.
Well, Dan, I can honestly say that your segments are definitely out of this world. Dan Klein, it is always a pleasure chatting with you, and I want to wish you a great rest of the weekend, and we'll talk to you again next week.
Next Friday from Birmingham, Alabama.
All right. I love Birmingham. I'll talk to you soon, Dan.
I'll see you then, Jeff. Bye-bye.
Well, that wraps up this episode of BRN Sunday. Have a topic of interest, someone you think we should talk to, drop us a line. And don't forget, for all the information in retirement, markets, technology, personal finance, so much more, all in one place, check out today's edition of our daily newsletter, The Morning Pulse. We're back again tomorrow, this time for BRN AM. Until then, I'm Jeff Snyder. Stay safe, keep on saving, and don't forget, roll with the changes.